Hello and welcome back to the Meted Podcast. I'm Jimmy, and joining me today is Brian Cronin. Is it Brian Cronin?
Yeah, you got that.
I got it.
Not everyone gets a last name right,
yes,
but you nailed it.
First try. I didn't practice at all. This is a one-take wonder. He is an engineer and a game designer, and we're just going to be talking today about what you do and kind of how you got there, your interests in gaming and not gaming, because this podcast, it doesn't really matter. We just talk about whatever. Exactly. So,
and games take a lot of inspiration from other things that aren't games, and that's generally a good thing. So.
Exactly. I feel like you sent me kind of a little email, a little blurb about yourself and how you got to where you are now, and the thing that I caught on to the most is your interest in like card games such as Netrunner and the one you're starting, the Monster Training Academy, which, by the way, the art for that, I went to the Tumblr or website and I was blown away. That game looks really nice.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. I have to, the artist I work with, my partner in that project named Aubrey Sear, does all of the artwork. And Aubrey is pretty tough on himself. He really pushes himself, and if something isn't exactly the way, he's trying to approach like Miyazaki film level of quality. I just kind of tell him there's probably dozens, if not hundreds, of artists working on those movies, and so maybe lower the bar a little bit.
Yeah. Either way, he's killing it. Those, I mean, the small little bits that I looked at were incredible. I was blown away with the detail. He's hurting himself. You should help him out with that one. But yeah, not even just like Netrunner as what is it, like an asymmetrical
game? So Netrunner is not a game I worked on.
Right.
It's a game I'm just totally obsessed with, and it's an asymmetric physical card game. So you play with actual cardboard on a table with people. And it does have a web implementation that fans put together, but generally you play in a game store or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a cyberpunk game. So one player is what they call the runner, and that's a hacker, and the other player is a corporation. And so it's asymmetric in that the way you win as the corporation is very different from how you win as the runner. But they both interact in it. It's amazing it works, and it's a fantastic game.
Yeah, so what intrigued me about your interest in Netrunner was then looking at the games you've worked on or tried to start, like your own non-digital card game, the One Last Job, where it had the same sort of feel where you have like the two teams and they're like good versus evil working against each other in tandem. And not only that, but the actual game you've worked on, or video game, the Natural Selection 2, from what I saw, looks like it's sort of the same mechanic, just applied to like a base building video game.
That one's definitely very asymmetric as well. And maybe I'm drawn to that to some extent. Natural Selection 2, I worked on mostly as an engineer. So I didn't do a whole lot of the design work on that, very little actually, just little inputs here and there.
Right.
But I did, I was the lead programmer on that project, so I did a lot of work on that one. But yeah, that one is very asymmetric. There's two teams. It's an aliens versus space marines type of game. And the aliens are very unique. Each of the alien characters has like, one of them flies, one of them crawls on walls, one of them teleports around. They're all very, a lot of melee combat. And then the Space Marines use technology and jetpack packs and grenade launchers and all that kind of stuff. So, I think asymmetry in games is really fascinating and trying to balance that. And so always drawn to that.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'm not a game developer at all. I always struggle with whenever I play a game, I try and kind of get down to how it's balanced, and that's what multiplayer games now can be like boiled down to, is like, how is it balanced? How many characters are they, and how can like you keep someone engaged in this game by keeping it balanced, but not. It's kind of hard to like not shift the favor towards one side. At least from like a gaming point of view, like I wish I always had the most powerful character. So I'm always wondering, if when you're engineering and when you're coding something that requires like balance across the board, but you're developing these very two like different ideas, like an alien natural trap building, and then like versus like military marines, scientific technology wise, like when you're actually putting the work into those mechanics, does it get difficult like down the line when you keep adding more and more like functionality to the game? Or
right. It's interesting comparing a game like Natural Selection 2 is an action game.
Yeah.
Most of the players play from a first-person perspective, and it's Twitch gameplay like you might expect. It's first-person shooter combat. So to some extent, like there's two levels of balance there. There's on one level it's just the math. Like you can sort of boil it down to DPS, so what we call damage per second. Yeah. And so you want to make sure that's roughly balanced. Like if two players are of equal skill level with that character class, will they tend to do the same DPS to each other? And that's kind of boiling it down a lot because it's not always that straightforward.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that type of balance is pretty straightforward, right? Just like that's just math. And so that's pretty easy to do. And you do that a lot in card games too, which is like, this card should be just as good as any other card in the game.
Definitely.
On a mathematical level. Because if it's not, then everyone's going to play it, and why wouldn't you just play that card?
Exactly.
And then with something like Natural Selection, it's an action game, the other level of balance is a lot in player skill, just where, maybe it's easier to play as the Marines, and so people will be better with the Marines on average. Mm-hmm. But maybe there's like a greater ceiling, more depth possible with the aliens, and I'm just kind of making this up right now. I don't know that that's true, especially in modern natural. That game came out in 2012, and I haven't played it in probably 4 years.
Oh yeah, it's ancient now.
Yeah, no, but it's amazing. The game still has an active community.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
But yeah, there's that level of balance just with player skill, and that's much more nuanced and difficult to master as a designer or as a balance.
I gotcha. Yeah, so you can never really factor in how people are going to play the game. Even like after testing is done, it would seem there's always something that's going to come up
and
later.
There's levels to it. There's just you don't have to necessarily change the game. Just given enough time, people will get better at the game. They'll learn the game better. I think card games are a great example of this, where there's some cards that designers put into their game. So there's a designer named John Trevoranis, and he worked on this game called Duelist. Mm-hmm. This is a digital card game. He's a good friend of mine. I play Netrunner with him a lot, and he told me this. They designed cards in Duelist they did design cards in Duelist for different player skill levels.
Okay.
So they would have these cards that, when you first start playing that game, they're really going to trip you up. Someone's going to be playing that card, and it's going to be a big challenge. You're not going to know how to beat that card. It's just going to seem impossible.
Right.
And then given enough time, and as you learn, you'll kind of overcome that challenge, and you'll understand the game well enough to know that card is very trivial to beat. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's very easy once you know. So card games often have these kind of levels that you ascend as you're learning how the game works. And there's cards that sort of test your skill level as you progress.
That's pretty great. It's crazy to think that like a singular card can have that kind of impact on a game. And I like, obviously a card isn't unbeatable. Like it would seem that way. Not. Yeah. Like, as you said, it's like, it would seem that way at first, and then you learn the trick, or you get like an opposing deck, and you get the opposing card, and you're like, oh, right. I got it. So it's crazy that those same concepts definitely apply for like Natural Selection 2 and other asymmetrical games. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty crazy.
And another aspect that's fascinating about digital games is just that you can patch them very quickly. And so the kind of meta changes very rapidly sometimes. And you can make a very minor change that has very big implications that sometimes you didn't account for. Right.
And I mean, there's a huge section of people now who are, I'd say obsessed with, following the meta of whatever game they're interested in and trying to take advantage of the very minute changes that are, like put in patch notes, and they're like, oh, 0.65 buff on whatever character, like time to use them forever.
And so it's almost like a market where, and I figured it'd be good if we spent some time talking about metagames in your podcast.
There we are.
There's sort of a market to the meta. So, I mean, I don't know if we should break down what a metagame is for your audience, or if I'm being silly.
If you want, I don't know if I have an audience anymore, I don't know what they know. Yeah. Go over
like
it.
A metagame in a card game just kind of refers to, you play a deck and you can have fun with that deck. Then you bring it to a tournament and you find out, oh, I'm getting beat because everyone else is playing, the Giants deck, and the Giants deck just beats my deck.
Exactly.
So I should figure out what beats the Giants deck. It's kind of that rock, paper, scissors that occurs more in like tournament play or league play or whatever.
Right.
So that's kind of a basic idea what the meta is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually forgot why we were just talking about the meta.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's just because we can. The podcast is named Meta.
Yeah.
Why not?
It came up for some reason, but my brain's going faster now, and I'm losing track of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's kind of the show. It's just we jump from topic to topic at light speed. You don't even have time to analyze or pick up on what's going on. You're just like, what did I miss? Did I miss anything? I don't know.
That's cool.
Yeah, but we're fine. We're in the moment. I think in terms of meta, we were talking about it because there's like it's got to be a large subset of people now online that once patch notes for any game come out and they are able to analyze these specifics. Like I'm thinking specifically of like Dota 2. Where a new character will be patched, or a new character will be in, or old characters, etc. Like, there's so many characters now, I can't even follow it. But these people do the backbreaking work of going through the patch notes, finding out all of this stuff, and trying to monopolize on these small changes that have been put in place.
Yeah, and that can be really powerful. I actually have a brief story about this very topic.
Yeah.
So with card games, even a game like Magic, in this case Netrunner, same idea. If a new set releases and you kind of get ahead of the meta and you test it fast enough with your player group and you find out what the best deck is, you can have a big advantage at that first tournament after
definitely
that release. And so I was practicing with my local friends for the big national championship for Netrunner, which was actually up in your neck of the woods, up in Seattle, a couple of years ago.
Oh, cool.
And so we were testing for it, practicing, and a couple of players in my group were developing this just kind of wild deck. It was just a total joke, a total meme deck that was very silly. It was just like, well, we're going to draw every card in our deck, and then we're going to figure out how to win the game somehow.
Nice.
And I get pretty skeptical of that kind of thing. It seemed like a joke. I was just testing my serious deck, whatever. But enough of players in the local area were interested enough in this concept that they all worked on it, and they discovered one or two interesting interactions between a couple of cards that not a whole lot of people thought about. And they ended up bringing that deck. It was kind of a glass cannon type of deck. There was a lot of things that could defeat it, but if you didn't have those things against you,
blown away.
Yeah. So about I think 5, maybe 4 or 5 of our players played that deck. There's a lot of waffling the night before. We called it the Waffle House because you were like, am I going to play the deck? It's risky. And we talked a lot about how you're going to do rain dancing if you play the deck. You're going to have to dance through the meta. Dance through all the hate against this deck that might be out there.
Oh man, yeah.
But to cut a story short, actually John Trevor Honest, we talked about before, he brought that deck and he played it and he won that tournament.
Oh man.
He danced through the rain, and his deck was kind of just we call them monkey decks. They're decks that you don't have to put a whole lot of thought into. I mean, it definitely takes some skill to play, but it's an engine, and if you just play it and do its thing, and you do it fast enough, you can win the game.
Right. Scratch your head, eat the banana, you win the game.
Yeah, I'm simplifying to some extent, but I guess my point there is that there's players who really enjoy analyzing the meta, and this deck was all about just what are other decks are people going to be playing.
Definitely.
And if you can accurately predict that, you have a big advantage.
Definitely.
And it's a whole area of play with card games for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I I've it's funny, Paul, who isn't here today, but he played Smash Melee competitively for a little bit, and so he was big. I think that's probably why we ended up calling the podcast Meta, is because
Makes sense.
he was big up on that Melee meta for the longest amount of time, and I'm just sitting here playing casually, playing Kirby, not really knowing anything about what meta was like as a concept in gaming. I think for the longest time, I didn't want to know that there were so many like small interactions and gameplay elements and characters and how characters interact, and
yeah, you can go deep with that.
That's
stuff.
the thing. It's
what's fascinating
crazy
to me about like fighting game metas is you have a game like Street Fighter 2 or Smash or whatever, and I don't play these games a whole lot myself, so I'm not an expert,
right.
but I know
Same
that
here.
they have these shifting metas. They have these metas that over time the sort of favored characters shift slightly. I think there's still like Kirby or whatever might not ever really see play, but there's a shifting roster of characters that see play, and without the developers adding new content at all, that higher level metagame shifts, and that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's one of the elements where, I mean, the fact that you brought up like player skill being a huge factor in meta, that's it. Like some person started playing a character that was low in the rankings and got good enough at them that they were able to sweep a competition or something with a character that no one was expecting, and there you have it. These internet memes started changing the meta, et cetera, et cetera. And
right. No one knows how to play against that character.
Yeah, and no one took the time to like figure out how to counter, and you're just like, I'm in this position of power now. Like, I don't know. Again, I've never been there because I suck at fighting games, but I can assume people that change meta to their advantage have a pretty good time. Probably extremely stressful as well, just to like put that much effort and like with the deck have like a glass cannon that could be completely obliterated if
and you can just get unlucky. We had another big tournament we played in 2016 where we all had kind of another glass cannon deck, and a lot of us played it. There was probably 8 of us playing in that tournament, and half of us kind of made it through the initial rounds and got up to the top tables where our deck was designed to fight in.
Right.
The other half of our players, they kind of dropped their first couple games and they got put down into the bottom tables where it's just completely random down there.
Yeah.
That's just kind of there was a little bit of randomness, but we kind of had a shotgun effect. Enough of us made it, and so it worked out.
That's pretty great. I mean, I love old school. I mean, it's not even old school. Like, I don't know. It's just traditional games as well. I think like Netrunner, like any board game that has a continued fandom, even if it's out of print, like Netrunner, or I think again Glenn not here, but he was a big Magic fan, and so the fact that new cards and stuff of are like always coming out, it's just. It's pretty fun that so many people just can get together and have a good competition at some point and have a good time.
There's this Star Trek card game that originally came out in the 90s at some point.
Oh.
It's just a Star Trek trading card game, something like that. And it hasn't been printed in many, many years.
Right.
And the fans just kind of took it on and created their own sort of, I don't know, they started creating their own cards and
that's pretty
cool. Supporting the game with tournaments, and the game is still alive. Like they meet, maybe they have a couple tournaments a year that they all meet at Gen Con or whatever, some big gaming convention, and they still play this card game they all love. That's been basically dead for almost 20 years.
It's alive. It lives on. But yeah, since we've kind of started with like I don't know, Netrunner. Not something you've made, but something you deeply enjoy. Do you want to kind of talk more about what you are currently doing, what you've done to get where you are now, or do you want to like first gaming experiences, traditionally, non-traditionally? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I guess give some history here. I don't know if people care too much, but I guess what's interesting is I started in 2005 just professionally as a game engineer. Game programmer, and I worked on mobile games. But this was 2005. It was before the iPhone,
Right.
which I think came out in 2007 or somewhere around there. And so we were working on mobile games before the iPhone, which were incredibly garbage games for the most part. Snake was probably one of the better mobile games, to be honest.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And so I worked on a few mobile games in that era. I know the one that I actually released was a mobile game based off of the Da Vinci Code movie.
The movie?
Based
You had
off of the
Tom
Da Vinci
Hanks in your
Code-
game?
Yes, I made a game that featured Tom Hanks. He never visited the office, though.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
too
That
bad.
was disappointing. But yeah, I worked on a bunch of mobile games. I had another, like a CSI game, CSI Miami game I was working on,
Oh,
other
that's
things
tight.
that didn't actually ship.
Right.
But that's kind of where I got my start.
Okay, but for real, was Tom Hanks contacted?
I'm almost certain he had no idea anybody was licensed to make a game of the Da Vinci. I'm sure he didn't care.
Oh, man. You probably could have met Tom Hanks at some point.
I very much doubt that, but I would have liked to.
That
Why
would have been
not?
great. That would have been so cool. Oh, so you started on pre-smartphone mobile games.
Yes.
Somehow that was a thing.
Yeah, it was definitely a thing. There was definitely a good amount of successful companies doing that, and they were interesting to work on. They were very limited in terms of the hardware you had available, and more so, probably just as much with the Android market, I imagine, but so fragmented. You had so many different devices and
Definitely.
so many different restrictions.
Oh my God, yeah.
So you're basically always writing your code to the worst phone that you would release on.
I gotcha. And then trying to add features or functionality to buttons, phones with more buttons.
Yeah, and I mean, not so much even. The games I worked on, it was very much just about supporting as many phones as possible. So there were phones at the time that supported like 3D graphics. That was something that was starting to become popular.
Dang.
But there were so few games for those because none of those games would work on crappy phones.
Right.
So why would you work on a game like that?
Yeah, sell it to the 20 people who have the good 3D phone. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. I totally played Tetris and Snake on my phone, and I never even thought about that being the market where now, app stores, Google Store, smartphone, that huge market. I never even thought that it started. Of course, it started on the precursor flip phones. I didn't even put it together until now. I'm talking to you.
Yeah, there was early I don't know if you remember that Motorola Razr phone.
Oh, definitely. I had a silver one, I believe.
Okay, a lot of people had that phone. So that was kind of the core device that we targeted.
Gotcha.
We had to target devices that were worse than that phone, but that was kind of the era that I developed the games on. So phones like that, they had basically their own app store that had probably calculators and apps and also had games.
Right.
So
I wasn't allowed to spend money on that phone. I think I was still on my mom's plan at that
probably
point.
for the best. There was a lot of schemes on those
definitely.
app stores to get you to subscribe to things and whatnot.
Oh man, I could have been subscribed to so many things.
Yeah.
13 years on. But yeah, so you started on, mobile games, and it looks like you've continued on. I mean, Natural Selection 2, came out in 2012, but that's a bona fide PC game that's on Steam.
So probably in about 2007, basically when I was working on those mobile games, one of my coworkers, who became a friend of mine, I would hang out at his place, and I saw him making artwork for, he's making go-karts, just in a 3D modeling software.
Cool. Yeah.
And this made sense because we were obsessed with Mario Kart in our office. We'd play every day.
Of course.
So he was just making go-karts. And I started talking to him, being like, hey, it'd be cool if we can drive those go-karts around, right? And so I fired up some code and started writing using the language at the time I liked to use was called C++.
Okay, yeah.
Still like that language. And I cobbled together some code to put together some open source libraries that let you do things like physics simulations and rendering 3D graphics, stuff like that.
Cool.
And after a little bit of time, I put together kind of a go-kart game. And so that eventually turned into our game called Zero Gear, which we released in, I think it was early 2009.
All right.
Yeah, so we spent probably a couple of years working on Zero Gear, and that was our first kind of like independent game that we put out.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it all started from just looking at an obsession with, a healthy obsession with Mario Kart and 3D modeling and...
Yeah, definitely. We played Mario Kart every day at lunch for probably a year or so.
That's pretty great. And I mean, it looks like a lovely game. Like there's just some adorable graphics going on there.
That's David Marsh, his name is, or Dave Marsh, I guess he goes by more often.
Mm-hmm.
And the company is named Nimblebit that we founded, and now they're more known for this game called Tiny Tower now, which is a pretty popular iPhone game.
It's a mobile game. I think I did play that one. It's got really cute little guys, and you build your tower up.
Yep, and you build the tower up and find jobs for them, and
that's pretty crazy.
Almost like a simplified sim tower.
Yeah, I think I was somewhat obsessed with that game for a little.
Many people were.
Quick second.
So, I didn't work on that game, but that it's the same artist.
Yeah. Now that you've said it, like the head shape.
Yep.
Is very similar to Zero Gear.
He definitely has a certain style.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to work with some pretty good artists in my time.
Definitely. I'm looking at Planetoid Pioneers now, and that game looks great.
That one was just a short contract job. That game's now released. Is now released, I meant to say.
Gotcha.
And so it's a really fascinating game. It's kind of this physics sandbox game where people can make their own planets that have like different mini games on them, and it's all just crazy physics, and you can build your own, ships and whatnot.
Yeah.
I worked on a very small part of that game and a very just technical part of the game, so it'd be hard to describe what I did without going deep into engineering.
Totally fair. Unless you really feel like it, I think we're good. But that's pretty cool. I mean, that's the thing about, I guess, like, conceptually, when you make a game like Zero Gear, you're like, racing game, there's this many mechanics that we're going to do, and we're just going to make a race, like, go-kart game. And then you do a contract job like Planetoid Pioneers, and suddenly you're like, I did one very small thing, and it's hard to explain, so let's just talk about something more, like...
I have a funny story about that. I was talking to another developer. I live in the Bay Area. I was talking to a developer who worked at LucasArts and when they were still around. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me how LucasArts had hired this... I don't remember the details. I want to say it was like a Ukrainian programmer. Okay. They brought him in.
Cool.
He was very good at doing special effects.
All right.
And they were doing a Star Wars game. I think The Force Unleashed, probably.
Yeah, definitely.
And so they were like, okay, we need you to make Force lightning. We want to have lightning that you shoot out of your fingertips, electrify guys. It'd be great. We want you to do that.
Right.
And he said that this Ukrainian programmer went basically into some back office. They didn't see him for like 6 months.
Oh, boy.
Just who knows what's going on, but we're going to have Force lightning. We're told he's the best. And then after 6 months, he comes out and shows him his work. And this developer friend of mine, he says, it was the best Force lightning, the best lightning in a video game you've ever seen.
Oh, my God.
It was incredible, But that's the kind of specialization that the bigger studios have. They have people that are just, sometimes for a year or two, are working on something that is so incredibly just narrow in what it does.
Yeah. Get the lightning guy from Force Unleashed for the one. I want like a small indie dev to like somehow get a huge $1 million Kickstarter, and then they're like, we want lightning to strike one tree, and we need the lightning guy. And they track him down. There's
definitely developers, there's definitely programmers in the game industry that have like the thing they specialize in.
Yeah.
And they kind of they're so good at it, and like no one else does it, so they kind of move from project to project, just doing that one thing they do.
That's pretty great. Are you?
I'm the opposite of that.
You're the opposite. You're kind of just a holistic all-arounder.
Yeah, I usually we usually say generalist.
Generalist. See, I don't even know industry terms. I'm just out of it. I just talking to a microphone and hope you talk back.
It works out.
Yeah. Oh, you're gone? Oh, no. No, but so as a generalist, are you, not that you, of course, you don't specialize in anything, you specialize in everything. Is that more or less kind of how it goes?
Yeah, that's fair. It could be anything from just like, well, we want to make this game. Can you do that? And can you, like, there's a certain architecture of how you might build up a certain game.
Right.
Like something like a real-time strategy game requires a very different architecture from, a first-person shooter.
Definitely.
So, I do that type of work. Just kind of starting, I've put together a lot of games on my own, so I'm pretty good at just kind of constructing the basics of what a game needs to function. Or like user interface, so all the things that are kind of on the screen at all times, your health bar, your ammo, all that kind of stuff, to physics, to sound effects. It's a lot of just kind of, there's a lot of disparate systems in a game, and you need to kind of bring it all together, and they all need to coordinate efficiently. Right.
That's
often what a generalist does.
Right, and not even just a generalist. Like, it sounds like you are very talented in whatever you choose to do, be it sound effects, whatever you're kind of... Are you usually independent? I mean, it seems like you're tasked to something. If you're contracted, it's like the lightning guy. You kind of get put on a task to do UI control. I don't know, something like that.
Right, yeah, it depends. Like with Planetoid Pioneers, I was actually approached because the lead guy on that project knew I had worked on natural selection too, and we shared some of our like architecture of the game was similar.
Okay,
we both used the same scripting language inside of our game to make the gameplay happen. And so he knew that I had some experience with this, and they had a problem they needed to solve before they shipped the game involving the scripting language, and so I was brought in to help them with that aspect.
Cool.
Other projects, like the project I'm working on right now at my full-time job, it's a lot more fluid. So there are some high-level things. Like this week, one of the things I'm doing is building a merchant screen. Like you can buy stuff from a merchant.
Oh, yeah.
And that's about as much detail as I got. It's kind of like, you kind of know what we need this screen to do, and you'll figure it out. It's
right. That's pretty cool. So when you're, working on, for instance, like the merchant screen, the whole game is already a conceptualized piece that's being built in pieces and kind of stitched together. So are you kind of taking the framework for what needs to be in this merchant screen, merchant area, and then
this is a good question. I think I get what you're saying. So a lot of this depends on how you've architected your game and how you like transition from screen to screen. And a lot of these, so we're using a game engine called Unity, which is pretty popular.
Yeah.
And it supports this concept of scenes. So like you'll unload a scene and load another scene. And that's important for performance reasons, just like the amount of stuff you have in memory at any given time. And there's a lot of good things you get out of that. But it also complicates things a bit. So now you actually need to handle that transition somehow, and there might need to be an animation between the transition, and all this kind of stuff. And so we kind of have, you follow patterns when you're making a game, so we have architecture for screens. We have like the main game screen, and then we have like this map screen. So we have that architecture built. And so now, at this point, I'm following the pattern. So I'm just creating another screen that represents its merchant, and I'm literally just copying a file and pasting it to start that, that new screen.
Right.
And then you shape it to fit and you put in the features you need for this screen, and that's the basic process at a high level. But you do need to architecture. You need the architecture initially of how you're
exactly.
In Unity, it's very flexible. Like you don't have to use scenes. You can just have everything in memory at the same time, and it's very trivial. Like, and you can construct your game and architect it at a base level in almost any way you want.
That's pretty cool. So yeah, it does seem like it is about like the strong framework to build upon, but also just being able to kind of go deep into a specific, like part of the work. I mean, it sounds great. It's pretty cool. What you do is fascinating to me, and that's why I'm glad you kind of reached out. I reached out, and you reached out back, and so I'm glad we're talking. It's very interesting.
We call it game engineering, and it really is a form of engineering. So
definitely,
the part that makes it complicated is it's software. It's soft. There's not really rules. You have to enforce the rules on yourself. So with engineering proper, there's rules. There's gravity.
Definitely.
There's steel is going to melt if you heat it too much. There's all these just kind of fixed rules that you have to work around.
Yep.
With software, there's not really too many rules. You can kind of do whatever you want. And the problem is, if you just do whatever you want, you're going to have really subtle bugs and performance issues down the line. So you have to enforce the rules on yourself. You're using the term framework, and that's really appropriate. We use the term framework. You want a framework to enforce those rules on yourself, so you don't get into trouble down the line.
I gotcha. So it's all about not. I don't know. It's not even you would be ruining the fun for yourself down the line. It's saving yourself the hurt of the bugs and performance issues, like you were saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's great. The fact that you can start with a broader concept for digital card game. I think that's what you're working on, but
yeah.
And game designer, whoever's at the top of it has the idea, and then again, you all built the framework and are building off of it, and it's great how it is very much engineering is the perfect job title for that, because you are building it, you are creating it, you are implementing the features, you are. I don't know. It's great. I think it's great what you do.
And I've been doing this for about 13 years, and I feel like I'm only just starting to get good at it. It's how incredibly difficult it is to make a game. But at the same time, almost 10 years, actually, I put out my first game independently, and I managed to do that. I think if I went back and worked on the game, it would drive me crazy. So it's probably just engineered in a less than perfect way,
right.
Far less than perfect, but it really takes so long to get good at something like this.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm getting there.
You're finally getting there, and I think I think you're
not to discourage anyone who's interested in making games. It's also way easier now than it ever has been.
Definitely, yeah.
It's for the sirens going on.
No, it's fine. It probably hasn't taken you 10 years to get this far. You just, as with anything, you do always get better. So, of course, you would go insane trying to look back on an old game that you've coded. It's like going back. It's like an artist going back to a piece that they said was finished, or a cook going back and trying something after it got cold, and they're like, "Oh shit, my gazpacho." I don't know. It's just how anything goes. You've been working at it for so long. Of course, you're going to get better. And at this rate, I mean, you can only get better. And the games,
I would hope so.
Yeah, the games and stuff you produce just get better and better.
I don't always feel that way, but I would hope so.
I'd hope so, and I'd think so. But yeah, do you think when you were trying to create a non-digital card game, do you think you were kind of applying the same or at least similar game making concepts that you were learning through making engineering video games, or was it kind of a whole different process when you strip away the coding of it?
Right. Yeah, that was it. So I worked on this card game, tabletop card game called One Last Job. I worked on that one a lot, and I had a partner to work on it with, which was great. So we were working on a 2-player card game, and we had 2 players working on the game. So that worked out really well. Yeah, very different process overall, I'd say.
Yeah.
And the games that I directly contributed to in terms of design were much more action-oriented games, and so there was less strategy involved. And a card game is pretty much entirely strategy and tactics.
Right.
So very different process, and I went into that just being fascinated with card games and loving this game Netrunner, and just wanting to without really a great plan of what it was going to be. Just wanted to dig into it and learn and build. And so, yeah, very different process. Learned a lot about design working on that project.
Definitely, yeah.
And other than, I wrote a few scripts to help generate the cards that we would play with.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Yeah, like I had a Google Doc that then I would write a script that would like turn that into a PDF I could print. But other than that, my skill set as a programmer was not very well used.
You were just starting from scratch.
In a lot of ways, yeah. And luckily, I had a design partner on it and a lot of help. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was very much a learning process. And great project to work on for that reason.
Definitely. I feel like even though sadly it didn't get funded, but I mean, I feel like, again, the experience of just getting to start something that you felt super passionate about is probably fun. I think I've started enough projects now in my mind, or if I've put it on paper, I don't even know, where it's good to just start something, right? No,
I mean, what you remind me of there is, I think a lot of creative people have this, where it's like you're always starting some new project, and it's very difficult to be disciplined enough to finish anything in any way. See, I've started many projects and finished very few, but I have finished some.
Yes,
so.
I mean, and that's gotten you somewhere. So, unlike me, I got this podcast, and that's about... No, I'm just kidding.
But putting out something like a podcast or a video on YouTube or whatever is a project. It takes time. Anything that takes time, anything that takes more than like an hour to do is a project. And
definitely.
I mean, finishing anything creative like that is an accomplishment.
Definitely. I encourage anyone listening, if they ever want to, start a project and even finish a project, to do so. But starting the project's the easy part.
Tabletop games are great projects to work on because it has a very natural kind of iteration process where you have some idea in your head, you mess around with it on paper, you kind of print things out, you put it in front of some friends or family, and it doesn't work at all, it's horrible. And then if you're disciplined enough, you'll go and you'll make another iteration of it, and you'll try it again.
Definitely.
But it has a very natural and somewhat rewarding cycle to it. Yeah. As opposed to something like, I don't know, I haven't written a novel, but I imagine that's pretty difficult because you don't really have that kind of feedback loop to keep you going.
Yeah, it sounds like it would just be like you just write until you think you're done, and then you're like, uh-oh.
And getting someone to read is probably not easy. I mean, my cousin wrote a novel, and he would send me chapters, and it's my cousin. I love to read it, but it wouldn't be easy for me to fit that into my usual flow.
Yeah. Because then you're starting a whole nother project of being an editor, and that's just...
In some ways, yeah,
that's just a whole nother thing to go with. But yeah, so I think it's... you gave me all these wonderful links when you reached out to me and I reached out to you, and I checked out your YouTube channel with all your Netrunner videos, and I watched the skit where you were like kind of just memeing about like bad Netrunner gameplay, and I just thought like it's totally some kind of video that I would make where you're just like cut back and forth, kind of improv style. It kind of was like,
oh wow, I think I know which video you're referring to. That's an old one.
Yeah, it was an old one, but man, it was a good one. It was just you and your friend just like bullshitting about awful, like not even real Netrunner mechanics, but just
he was trying to put up real money.
That's just hilarious. And you put the time into editing it, and it was still about the passion you have about Netrunner. And I don't know, you gave me the links. I scoped the links. So
I'm impressed that you wanted. I forgot about that video entirely until you just mentioned it now.
Yeah, well, welcome to the past. We're here.
Yeah, I did a lot of videos for Netrunner. Some of them were more serious, kind of like tournament analysis videos, and some of them were more memery like that. And more recently, streaming with a good friend of mine, and that was definitely very silly. We were just trying to build very silly decks and mess with people online and stuff like that. So that was just for fun.
Yeah. But it's pretty great because before contacting you, I'd never heard of Netrunner before. And I'd heard of Cyberpunk 2020 and other games built off of that.
Right.
Yeah.
That old
RPG. But the fact that there was this really cool card game, and the artwork is cool. Like, not even just the artwork. I haven't played it, so I can't speak to the actual mechanics. But overall, it looks like a great game. And the fact that you brought it up so specifically as something you're passionate about, and even won 4th in a championship, and then was an engineer on a couple of asymmetric games. Do you have any opinions on other types of asymmetric games like Evolve or those types of games where they're really trying to push it into the mainstream? Because I feel like Evolve was really trying to grasp a huge audience, and it I think fell flat. I still never got around to playing it, so it failed on that front for me. But do you have any opinion on those larger studios trying to bring that asymmetric gameplay to the forefront of people's
it's interesting that you bring up Evolve. Like Left 4 Dead is another one that comes to mind.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
That made by this, Turtle Rock made the original Left 4 Dead game, and then went on to make Evolve. But I mean, there is a very popular, like the Starcraft is an asymmetric game that is very popular in mainstream.
Oh, definitely.
So
yeah.
it definitely exists.
Yeah,
but I think Evolve is a really good example because, there's a lot of games like, let's say Dota, that is asymmetric in some sense. Like the characters are all very different.
Right.
But you're still playing in sort of a symmetrical framework.
Yeah,
you have 3 lanes. Each team has 3, and you're both trying to do the same thing at the same time. So I think it's worth kind of distinguishing the like types of asymmetry, and I don't have terms for this, but you have like the character asymmetry versus the game structure itself is asymmetric. So Evolve was very much like the game structure was asymmetric, where it was 1 versus 4, and one of the players was like a giant,
big old monster.
Right, big old monster, like a Godzilla type thing. Yeah. So I can't speak to Evolve too much because I didn't actually play it.
Same. I don't know.
I always wanted to play, but I know the basic idea. I can totally see a game like that really taking off because asymmetry is fascinating. It's like
definitely
you can get there's 2 games you have to get good at. And that's twice as interesting as just being good at one game.
That's a great point.
So. Yeah, I mean, in StarCraft, there's people who just play, Zerg or whatever. They just play the one thing, and it takes that long to be good at the one thing.
Yeah.
So,
man, I didn't even think about StarCraft or Left 4 Dead. Those are huge, man.
Yeah, I think those are worth mentioning.
Definitely.
And Left 4 Dead is probably more asymmetric than StarCraft in that, it's like an attack-defense thing. So you often see that dynamic in asymmetric games of attack and defense.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that Evolve, I think, did differently. It wasn't really attacking. It was like this. The players were attacking the monster early in the game, and then it kind of shifted as the monster grew strong. And so they were doing something pretty interesting there.
Definitely. It was sad to see it be perceived, or I don't know, whatever Metacritic got on it now. Again, it's not even something I've played, but it was such an interesting concept to me. I was like, man, I wish I had enough people that would buy this game and play it with me. But I never got around to it because it was a big commitment to get this new game and put effort into it. But Left 4 Dead is like the opposite, where I played it with so many people and I never even thought of it as asymmetric because of its multiplayer.
Yeah, well, if you're just playing cooperatively, it's not really asymmetric. But I was thinking more about the competitive play.
Exactly. Yeah.
Half the players are zombies and half the.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it takes time for sort of a new game paradigm to take over. So like the only example that comes to mind right now is the battle royale games that are super popular now.
Oh right, yeah.
They kind of existed before. I mean, there was like Minecraft mods where you can play Battle Royale people were playing like 6-7 years ago.
Definitely, yeah.
And then there was, of course, like DayZ originally was like this quasi Battle Royale thing, and it was super popular.
Yeah.
But it takes time for some new gaming paradigm to take over, and so maybe maybe they were just a little bit ahead of their time. Maybe there will be another like big monster hunting game that'll come out in another couple of years and blow up. That's possible.
That's the hope, I think, because I feel like, I mean, I guess I don't even hope for it. It'd be cool if that did happen, because it's fun for different styles of games to kind of hold the public's attention, and then more and more studios are trying to not directly emulate that style, like the game exactly, but because there's, just like you were saying with the Battle Royale games, it's like there's Fortnite and Daisy and Days Past Light, and they're all trying to do the same Battle Royale thing. So I want
Red Dead Redemption Battle Royale.
Yeah, exactly. I want that phase of gaming to be over.
That phase is still relatively new. I mean, another really good example that comes to mind is Rocket League.
Oh, yeah.
This is a game that had been made before. Like the studio that made Rocket League, they made a game like Rocket League before Rocket League, and it's the type of thing. Yeah, and in our game Zero Gear, we actually have a soccer mode that it like functions pretty similarly. It's two teams, and you have a soccer ball, but they executed on it so well, and they focused entirely on that. They saw the potential, and a lot of other people had kind of experimented with kind of sport car games, and no one had really nailed it, and no one had nailed it at the same time as getting it out to a big enough audience for it to be appreciated. Yeah. So that was probably a 20-year process to get Rocket League
definitely
into the public sphere. That's how long it takes sometimes.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So I think it's not even about like cyclicalness, but we'll see gaming trends change from this Fortnite obsession to something else. I don't even know. I'm excited to see what the big thing is going to be after all this Battle Royale.
Plenty of people are trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is to make the next Fortnite but not have it, obviously be a Battle Royale is...
Yeah, what's it going to be?
Exactly.
What's the next big thing?
I'm super excited to find out when it's upon us. We won't even notice. But yeah, I think... And that's a pretty good place to wrap up. Just kind of,
sure.
We went super broad there, and just were like very heavily talking about, I don't know, just the sphere of gaming and how it shifts with time. And
well, I have no problem talking for many hours at a time about games. So I appreciate you sitting down with me and talking.
Well, you sat down with me. Let's be clear about that.
That's true.
No, I do. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure I've started, and being the first interview of just you make games. That's incredible. I play games. You make them.
I play them sometimes too.
You also play them sometimes. You have that ability. But usually you're making them. I think most of the time you're probably making them.
I do spend a lot of time making them.
It's kind of your job. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today, Brian Cronin. I said your last name right again. Yeah. Killing it. Thank you so much. Do you have anything you want to plug or talk about real quick before we wrap it up completely? Or
I'd say if people want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Brian G. Cronin, and so I'd be happy to follow folks back and share game stuff with people. And then you can check out monstertrainingacademy.com for more information on that digital card game that we're slowly working on.
And I definitely recommend checking out monstertrainingacademy.com. It's got some freaking sick art, and I am excited. Even just the small little poster thing that kind of was describing kind of what the base gameplay would be like was very interesting to me. Very excited for that. Follow Brian on Twitter. Follow the podcast on Twitter at MetedPodcast. I think that's it. It's been a while. Either way, thank you for listening. Thank you, Brian, again. Have a good day. Jimmy. You've been meted. Bye. Bye. Thanks, Brian.